Good morning and welcome to our last Fireside chat before the summer holidays. Hope you're all managing to keep cool today, and thank you for joining us. So we're talking about RPA and low-code today, and if we think about areas such as like production lines and factories and things, then robotics and automation aren't anything new, right? We've been using them to improve production lines, speed, efficiency for many years, and of course freeing up traditional line workers to do more skilled tasks. But if we look at the world of data entry administration, then we still find, almost, across every sector, really, we've had things like macros and apps and scripts and things that have looked at automating to an extent and processizing certain things. But generally speaking, proper automation and workflow efficiency has been quite expensive, proprietary, complex, and specialist, right? So it's meant that a lot of organizations haven't had the budget or the expertise to take those things on. And, looking around most organizations, right, and reading various, Gartner reviews and industry reviews, data automation and data entry is still quite, cut and paste, manual, 1980s, really still. And if you look at some of the global reports, and we'll share some of these afterwards, then they state that the average employee still spends between 50 and 80 hours a month on tasks that could be automated. That's like 3 to 4 hours a day in many cases. Now, I don't think I spend that much time doing manual tasks, but there are certainly lots of things that I do that I wish I could automate better. Whether that's filing documents, responding to things, taking data from one thing and pasting it into the other, or whatever it is. So this of course is very dependent on job role and stuff, but it's still, I think, something that is frustrating for many of us and things. If you look at the rise of machine learning and AI and the competition and availability of these technologies, and certainly it's a bit of a brand perception, right? So everyone's talking about RPA, low code and stuff now, in the same way as they talk about zero trust as regards to security. It's not totally new, but we are seeing a massive shift to the number of organizations that have now got access to this technology at a much, much lower cost. And we're seeing a huge growth in organizations looking at workflow efficiency and automation to really take any repetitive or paper-based task indeed and digitize it and leverage automation. There's a Gartner stat from late last year that reckons that 50% of larger enterprises and over a third of smaller organizations will be using some form of RPA and low-code by the end of next year. I would probably challenge that and say that most of the organizations I work with today are already starting to use that. So I'm joined as always by members of our advisory board. So welcome everybody for joining. A couple of new faces today as well. So thank you for coming on. Would you like to just very quickly introduce yourselves for people who haven't joined the show before? I'm going to just go clockwise around my screen. So Lee.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lee Phipps and I'm Strategic Enterprise Architect at East Riding of Yorkshire Council. So I've been in this role pretty much for 8-9 months and previously worked in infrastructure roles across the organisation.
Fantastic. Roland?
Hi, I'm Roland Hills. I'm COO for Leithwaite, an executive search firm with about 100 staff worldwide. So it's more than some of the other businesses here.
Fantastic. James?
Hi everybody, I'm James Davis. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at the Royal Free Foundation Trust that covers a group of 3 hospitals. We are a centre of excellence for automation and returned about 300,000 hours through automated processes last year. We've got a team of about 20 developers, so looking forward to chatting over this subject.
So you should be running the show really, shouldn't you today, James? Thank you. Kieran?
Hi, I'm Kieran Prince. I am the Head of Cloud and Infrastructure Engineering at L&Q. L&Q are responsible for 105,000 homes across the UK. I've been in the technology game for about 20 plus years now.
And last but not least, Madassa.
Hi, my name is Madassa Ulhaq. I'm CIO for Waveton Investment. I oversee the company group structure as well with the recent acquired companies, Waveton Wealth, based in Scotland, and also Timothy James and Partners, who are also based in London.
Great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So, as always, I've got a few questions I'm going to pose to the panel. And again, for anyone listening, if you've got specific questions, you're listening on LinkedIn or YouTube, please pop any questions into the chat or any comments. We obviously welcome the feedback, and we'll try to respond to any questions and things that we get. So if we start with a bit of a pop quiz, I think RPA and low code are kind of terms that are used quite commonly without sometimes people really understanding what we mean by that. So I was going to kind of pose a question to all of you, really. If you found yourself in an elevator and you were talking about, not that you would, like you were talking about low code and RPA, how would you describe that? Right. So I'm going to give you all a minute just to kind of say, tell people how you would talk about RPA and low code and kind of the differences between those two things, because quite often I hear them used in conversation between each other. Also, just a shout out, I'd like to welcome Amanda. Thank you for joining us, Amanda. I know you've been back to back in meetings, so thank you for joining us. James, I'm going to hand over to you to kick off that question, because
Sure. So I describe automation as the emulation of any activity through a keyboard and mouse into any digital application. Low code, I would usually use something around the ability to drag and drop sequential processes in some kind of graphical interface using minimal amount of parameters and entry-level code. I usually use language around being able to code in Excel and use Excel formulas, and you should be pretty okay with low code app development. And that's pretty much in about 20 seconds how I describe it.
You did well there. Lee.
Yeah, I think similar to James, but then just pushing that point about it, about using it to reduce that kind of manual process, and maybe pushing that point that it's not necessarily something that just sits within IT or the technical teams, that you could potentially look at the wider organization taking advantage of the low code, no code side of things. But then we'll maybe get onto the challenges of that later on.
Fantastic. Madasa.
I guess I would probably state that low code is more or less a software development approach that requires little or no coding to build applications and processes within the business. It's also leveraging an empowerment aspect as well, which allows end users to really have the ability to go away and develop complex models using third-party applications.
Roland?
Well, I think this is always the issue.
It gets harder towards the end, doesn't it? It gets harder towards the end.
I think that I would focus on the fact that it is a tool that can be used by non-technical staff. It empowers end users to be able to do things which 10 years ago absolutely required an IT team to deliver for you, if it could be done at all. I think I would perhaps. I picked up on one of the things James said about it being, if you can do stuff in Excel, then you can do it here. And I have seen some monstrosities of things built in Excel because Excel is, for all its faults, a massively powerful tool, especially once you start to stray into the world of VBA and things. And it's a bit of a halfway house between genuine low code, no code type solutions and fully coded things. I once saw an Excel spreadsheet with 25,000 lines of VBA behind it, which was very clearly should never have been a spreadsheet at that point, and probably also wouldn't now be a low-code solution either. It's something that actually needed a database and a bit of proper thinking about it behind it. So I'm sure we'll come on to some of those wider issues, but there's always a risk of building something in a low-code environment that shouldn't really be, but it can certainly be used for a lot of prototyping things, and it can also be used for a lot of permanent things these days in a way that just wasn't possible a few years ago.
Totally. Thank you, Ryan. And Kieran.
What do I say at this point? I might as well talk about boxing. But no, I would simply say along the lines of if you're fed up of doing manual and repetitive tasks, this RPA can help free up some of that time. With low code, it will be around aspirations of development without having to know how to develop. So creative thinking empowers people to create processes that are inefficient more efficient.
Excellent. And Amanda, I'm not sure if you can hear us or not. I saved you till last, but yeah, just really keen on your your view of RPA and low code, how you describe it to anyone listening. Well, I think we might have just lost Amanda actually for a minute.
It looks like she stepped away.
I'll let her off that question.
The dreaded Amazon man has probably struck.
Yeah, something like that. Or green thumb. That's normally one of those things, isn't it? Guys, thank you. That was a good summary. So I guess the next I'm really keen to understand. I know some of the things between you, but I think it'd be really good to share between yourselves. You know, how is your organisation taking advantage of low code and RPA within your organisation today? You know, what platforms are you using, or if you're not, you know, what platforms are you looking at and dabbling in? James, do you want to start? Because I know we talk about this conversation a lot.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, I don't want to be too platform centric. We use Blue Prism along with Power Automate, or Flow as it's now known. But putting that to one side, we use it excessively across a number of different things. I think in total we automate just under 200 different processes. For our recruitment service alone, we automate 36. And that's a lot. That's a lot that we do. And the reason why we automate, to a point that was made earlier, is to augment the human workforce that's out there, not to replace them necessarily, but to allow them to do activities or to enjoy tasks that are more emotionally sensitive and emotionally intelligent, that you just aren't ready to hand off to an AI, an ML, or a robot to handle. Mm-hmm. Yes, so these are sensitive matters. You wouldn't want, I don't think we're quite at a space where an AI or a robot is ready to prescribe the antibiotic or the coagulant that you should be on. We're happy to help it inform our exercise routine and how many crunches we should do this morning to get that six-pack for the summer, but not quite our medicine yet. So we use it across a lot. So for our cancer referrals, we use it for recruitment, for our financing and payroll. All those different areas we're able to deploy RPA. The reason that we're set up also that in such a way that we don't undertake this activity just for ourselves. So we provide this RPA capability across the entire NHS for another 60 different trusts. And now we also provide the capability for external private hospitals, as well as completely private companies that want the capability that the team has, but isn't able to get the skilled workforce, or has no desire to employ a skilled workforce to the scale and size that we have, which is, for me, it's great. It's incredible to see private companies consuming services from the NHS. Yes. It's never that. It's always the other way around. But it's great to see money coming into the NHS.
I think it goes to show, you know, the incredible motion of, you know, innovation at all levels, right? And I remember when we first started talking about this kind of technology a few years back, and it was just incredible to see, you know, the ideas and the concepts of what could be done more efficiently coming from everybody, right? Rather than coming from IT. It was incredible just to see those teams really coming together to think about and challenge. I remember us running a workshop and we had people sitting there, you know, doing their first bits of code and stuff, and it was just incredible to see how that's come. I know how far you've come as an organisation and what you've led, and it is absolutely game changing, right?
And I think that's where the real value for me of low code comes in, the ability to rapidly iterate an MVP, whereas before you'd need an army of full stack developers to knock something out in half an hour, an hour. It's not going to happen. But now we can have a conceptual call, and within an hour or two, there's something that people can look, touch, and feel. Even if we don't end up building it on that low-code platform, and we need a full stack, or we need it to be a React or whatever, we can get an iteration of it up and running in super, super fast. So we can test that concept, prove that idea from our user stories or the epics we built out, or from just a simple working group. Say, hey, does this look and feel how you want it to look and feel? And that's where I think a real value of low code is. Even if you don't end up building with it substantially, being able to rapidly prototype is really helpful.
Yeah, wow. And we'll come on to kind of where you start a little bit later on. But anybody else want to jump in with a story, however small or large?
Yeah, I can if you want. I think we're somewhere behind James, and we're in the very, very, very early days of looking into automation and RPA, but I think the first one we kind of looked at was around COVID times and how our schools were reporting COVID kind of outbreaks to us, and it was a case of them being emailed in spreadsheets. Somebody was pulling them all out into another one. And we looked to introduce kind of a SharePoint site for them all to fill that in, and then some kind of automation with Power Automate behind that to kind of centralize it all, create some dashboards, but then also notify the schools when they were hitting those ever-changing trigger levels, because the schools were kind of blindly filling in these spreadsheets at times and not realizing they were hitting any of these triggers because they were changing so often that it was 10% in a year, 20% of a class, all these kind of things. So that massively helped, because when I first spoke to them, they were like sat there looking at a shared mailbox with 300-400 emails in it every day, trying to get through them and pull all these stats out of where there were outbreaks and things like that. But I think
so
on
very
the
much
whole,
about taking that manual, I say manual, but email, just trigger type stuff, taking that data, doing something, turning that data into, I guess, actionable information, and then presenting that information back to them rather than letting them sift through the manual change.
Yeah. And I think we were quite lucky on that one, in that we had somebody come into our public health team at that time externally who'd kind of worked and created a similar solution elsewhere. So it was quite good, because we didn't really have the skills in-house or have any experience of doing it. It's kind of taught him and bounce ideas and learn from the end users at times, because we have had a lot of people come in from other organizations who have been quite experienced in the low code, RPA, even SharePoint, which is probably another conversation. But as we're starting to try and get the resource and skills in-house, we are kind of listening to users who have those experiences.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to add that we're looking at RPA from two particular use cases. The first around service availability, so mimicking that of a human, checking the service to see if it's responsive. So a lot of our websites, for example, we're offering services now 24/7, and some of the monitoring tools doesn't necessarily get to the fine granular detail that you need to see whether a service is available. But we do know if a user is using an application and what they do their day to day, they can tell us very easily whether or not that service works. So to replicate what that looks like using RPA is very attractive. Similarly, the other key use cases around patching. So we regularly patch our systems, and post-patching testing is where this also comes into play. Similarly, monitoring tools can help us to some degree to let us know availability of the server, whether the RAM is fine and things like that. But RPA comes in really handy to really understand whether that service is working.
Interesting. And are any of you, just to take them out to I guess to the next level, right? So when and James, you touched on a really good point earlier about, it's not about machines replacing people, robotics replacing people. It's more about, the informing and being the companion, right? And almost being their, trusted advisor and providing relevant insights that humans may not see or be able to operate on at scale. How far of any, just interested in how far any of you have taken that to the next level around actually using AI and ML for things like natural language processing or reading manual documents, and actually taking it that step further about taking analog type communication, writing and forms and stuff, and turning that into something digital. I was going to ask that question to Amanda, actually, if you've got a moment, because I know that's something that is very top of mind for you around how we reduce those kind of paper trails and things around an organization.
Yeah, so sorry, Rob, I've been a bit in and out. Apologies for that. And sorry if I've missed the thread of the conversation as well. I mean, we spoke just recently, didn't we, Rob, about the solutions we're looking at and how, what we're using RPA for now. And just to add to the chat as you went in the round earlier, the main thing for me with a clinical and operational hat on is the reduction in error rate you get as well with the use of RPA. It's safer, and you sort of the variation you get with human factors, you're weeding that out. In terms of some of looking at some of the other solutions, for us, it's around the use cases around validation, which is like, super boring topic and people do it in all sorts of different ways. But when you've got 90,000 people on your backlog, there is a significant opportunity if you can do it well. And so we're looking and exploring other solutions right now that help us do that. That doesn't mean I need to wrap another 20 people around it. And how we do that, maybe using chatbots or intelligent conversations with our backlog patients. So one, keeping them informed, but two, trying to understand their health right now and predicate outcomes from that. And there's a few examples of how that's happening around the country right now as well, with some varying success. Not just reducing the size of PTLs, but also in terms of being able to reach into those patients and prehabilitate them ahead of whatever the intended treatment might be. So there's some real wins to go after there if you can do it well. So it's something we're looking at right now.
And on the point, and you talk about error, right, and reducing error and stuff. How much has this enabled you to remove paper? Remove that manual form filling and things.
Yeah, so I mean, some of the processes that we've got up at the moment, so like referral uploads. So although the APIs have been released now, we're all pretty much still working with a pretty lumpy process between the national electronic referral system and our own PAS system. So that in itself requires people to transcribe a referral from a GP from one system and stick it into another one. And it's high volume stuff. So this is 4,000 of these a week for us. And I've got a team of 6 people that sit there and do that all day long, 5-6 days a week sometimes. So, and it's still resulted in clinic cancellations on the day ultimately, because if the referral's not in our EPR or visible to the clinician, that's not a safe clinic to run. And that was a frequent occurrence. I hardly hear those. I don't see those at all now. And particularly at Chase Farm, where we've got quite a slick paperless pathway across outpatients. So it does work. Our business exception rate is extremely tiny in that particular piece of RPA, and now looking at how we can do that in a faster pathway like our targets, which is worth another 1,200 referrals a week. In a really important clinical pathway where you really don't want any lag or waste in terms of cancellations on the day.
Wow. And I mean, I can vouch for certainly my experience of coming in and seeing you last week, and it was I think I described it. It's like don't mean to insult, but it's like going into McDonald's, right? It was incredible. You kind of walked in, it was all automated, it was really clean, everything was simple, you were really well informed. The experience was just incredible. It was quiet, there were no alarm noise, everything was just it was surreal. I mean, I think I joked to you and said, "Is it closed today?" It was incredible place to come in and kind of.
But we just created normal, right? That's normal.
Yeah,
that's what you expect. You don't expect to be handed bits of paper that are incredibly important to the rest of your pathway and then go and queue up. It's just it's crazy to think that that's how we were working like 3-4 years ago, and many still are. But yeah.
And I think it's it's testament to the team and James and your team, how well you've done those things. And I think you would probably say you're not at all at the mature level of this stuff, but I think compared to a lot, you've really innovated and stuff. And I guess for the rest of the panel, really keen to see where you've seen this going. What stage do you think you are? Were you in the dabbling stage? Have you done anything that really has transformed the way in which you've driven real efficiency savings or ROI or anything else around the function that you do?
Yeah, well, that has. I mean, I've just described one piece that we've got up and running at the moment and where we're going next. But in that program of work, I've got another 34 elements of RPA that have the potential to release something in the region of 300,000 hours. Now, I'm not looking at taking out heads. I'm looking at repurposing those heads to do the more value-adding stuff that I have, where I'm carrying historic vacancies, for forever and ever. And guess what? Everyone else is trying to do the same and increase and swell their A&C workforce. I think at the Royal Free London, our index A&C workforce is something about 25% of our entire staff population. It's massive. And it's just, when you look at the workflow and the processes, there is an awful lot of duplication, opportunity to be automated, types of pieces of work that we could be doing. So, yeah, for sure, we're not there yet, but we're well on the journey, and we've got all the right talent to deliver it for sure.
No, incredible story. I don't have the clappy hand things on this app, so I can't do it. Anyone else from the team have any?
Waverton are probably at the infancy of their journey. I mean, we've had staff leverage the E5 license naturally and have found Power Apps within the suite of applications that are available to them. And I guess what it's done, it's allowed them to leverage Power Apps to see whether there's an opportunity to transform what they do on a day-to-day basis that perhaps would have been a slightly more of a mundane task, to refresh data sets that they receive externally, saving them approximately 2 hours work. It's just sitting there and waiting. And then having that output available to share and distribute internally, whether that's via Teams or email. And more recently, what they've been experimenting is with Power BI, and it's that's the kind of area that they've leveraged. Now, I think Mike Allen and I and my COO have obviously seen an opportunity here that perhaps we could widen the scope across the business and really see where we could add value with the use of BPA and see where and how wider we can reach this amongst other business units. And as a result, we've discussed and started off an internal workshop, which looks at the visibility of the issue, how wider is a problem across the business, and also look at how difficult implementing such tools will be as part of that discussion. In addition to that, looking at how business critical the process is, because that would obviously prioritize the change, but at the same time, we would maybe reconsider the quick wins. How the quick wins are probably the ones that you probably want to test with and test the waters, and then expand the scope. And lastly, I think most importantly, I think we all know how severe the business process is, and what's the pain. What are the pitfalls, and I think those are our criteria that we're looking at, and using those as a baseline to then widen the scope. And actually, we've observed through the conversations and potential use cases that there is a need across the business. Other business areas could leverage automated processes, leveraging forms that then automate the back end to get certain approvals across the business. And I think it's an area that we feel that we will continue, and I think it's about mapping the processes that we have across the business, which is probably key for us to then determine what next, really. And if we can get a few quick win and use cases across certain business units, then we can obviously use them as a business case to push this out further.
And do you think it's one of those things that's I'll ask anyone that wants to put their hand up now, I guess, but is it quite an infectious thing? Is it this kind of thing that actually you have to go through that almost incubation stage, right, of looking at what's possible and almost showcasing kind of, wow, look at what we could do, look at the potential that we've got. And does it then become a bit of a that kind of adoption piece, right, of how you get people to take this stuff seriously, right? They've done something a certain way forever, they're the expert, and now you're almost taking some of those things and shifting that efficiency away. How does that kind of manifest itself inside an organization?
So I think I would say it definitely is something that people don't understand what you can potentially do until they can start to see it. I mean, we're definitely also very much at the start of this, and it's kind of being done side of desk by a few people who have a bit of an interest in it. At the moment, we've really got two main use cases. One is around things we want to add more control of in the automation for. So classic example there being some HR forms where we want to automate processes to make sure all the right steps are followed, because historically they've been based on someone sends an email and then want to look at it and check whether the right people are on the email chain to approve it and things. And now we've managed to replace that with an online form that then has a bit of flow and automate logic behind it to say, well, if it's this type of thing from this type of person, it's got to go to this person for approval, and just looping all of that around in the background. So by the time it gets to the right person at the end, they know that all the right people have signed it off. So that's one element to us. And the other one for us at the moment, and again, these seem like very basic use case, but I think they are what a lot of smaller firms in particular start to build on. The second one for us is around the really mundane tasks that would really slow things down. So we've recently changed our CRM system, and we had a whole load of data that we had to try and clean up and we couldn't find a way to extract it and process it through the main planned migration process. That's kind of database level copying. We had to do things in the front end of the system, but there were, in this particular case, about 20,000 records that we needed to go through, and getting someone to sit there and do that through the front end would have been A, mind-numbingly boring, B, would have taken probably literally a couple of months to do, and C, there would have undoubtedly been errors where they would have got it wrong. They would have ticked the wrong box, they would have put the wrong thing in. We were able to automate that and then just leave it running 24/7 until all the data was cleaned up. And then we had to go and manually recheck, a few hundred rows that for some reason the automation process hadn't been able to deal with. And that was really significant for us. So those would be our starting points in terms of what we're using for. But I know that is very much at the lower end of what you can do with these technologies. And I certainly am keen to know more about the potential, particularly when you start to bring in the sort of natural language processing and those sorts of things, rather than those very traditional automation pieces. It feels like we're doing stuff that you could do 7 or 8 years ago without too much difficulty.
Yeah, and I guess that comes on, and you raised a really interesting point earlier about the huge Excel macros, right, and things that existed, right? And I guess this is almost that, it kind of goes back to that, people talk about, the community developer and these kind of terms that get kind of thrown around, right? And I think a lot of it has always, of course, been around, we're now in a position now, and of course with the extensive set of APIs and connectors across these platforms and things that, you almost don't have to compromise on products that you buy or that you've got. You can actually take advantage of the tools that we've been talking about to try and perfect what we've got without necessarily replacing old legacy systems and those kind of things. But of course, it also raises that point around going back to the VB macro thing of when you buy an application, for example, typically and yes, you customize it and things, but you have a support mechanism, right? So you can raise a support issue with the vendor, and there's stuff gets updated in the background, those things. When you're building code and processes internally, who manages that? How do you deal with that kind of the difference between people dabbling and playing around with something and then becoming mainstream and that person then leaving, and that's quite an integral part of a process that you've now created that's not people centric. How do you deal with that, or what advice would you give to people starting out around how they handle the life cycle of these things?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like most, we've also adopted Power Platform, and a pattern we found with that is those that used to create the macros and VB within Excel are the ones that are the early adopters of Power Apps as well. And there's been quite a bug about it. I think the visualizations and the time-saving efforts that they've managed to achieve from that has been quite infectious, and it's almost like a bug going around the organization at the moment with some of the things that have been shown. But the constraints remain the same. So we had challenges with keeping control of macros, and now even more so within the landscape of information security, some of it being vulnerable to attacks and things like that. I think controlling it is a similar problem today, with a lack of governance, central way of architecting low code, and trying to centralize that as well. So, at L&Q, we started an initiative around a governance strategy, bringing in the major players that are very much interested in this, and trying to set up a way that we can manage it going forward. We don't have the complete answer, but as I say, this is something that has been historical anyway, with people doing their own thing to quicken things, but potentially leaving holes in areas. But now it's becoming even more powerful. And some of this financial reporting that's been done with low code, I've always seen it as a dark art. It's got even more darker now with some of the stuff that's going on. And it is really impressive and it's very empowering. But we do need to get to a point where we can get some sort of control. And the other thing I've also found is sometimes we're also quick to find a solution to a problem, without really understanding what the problem is we're trying to resolve. So a lot of it goes into solutionizing, building these tools to produce something. And the person sitting next to you might be trying to achieve the same thing, but doing it differently. Whereas a conversation ahead of time maybe could have saved time to do one thing together. So I'm trying to do that on a bigger scale, bringing everybody in to look at what are our actual problems and how best can we go about trying to resolve them.
Fantastic. James and Amanda, I know obviously your adoption of technology is pretty widespread across across your areas. What's your take on that?
So I think a couple of things. Automation's easy to do badly, I think, and flow makes it even easier to do it badly. So you can do something crudely in a single instance, but it doesn't scale at all, and nor is it manageable. So I encourage everybody to wrap all the security that you have within your Power Platform to restrict your community developers. We speak about shadow IT for like sporadic systems or software that pops up. You'll have the same thing if we're not careful in managing Power Apps, Flow, and anything else that people can grab their hands on through E3s or E5s. Flow also isn't a true RPA engine. It will automate tasks, but it's not a true automation engine. And I think to see the most of it, you have to invest in a team to do it properly and understand what your automation lifecycle looks like, and speak to people that have done it. I'll help anybody that needs pointers. And I think to Roland's point earlier about it is so many people do it on the side of a desk as a bit of like a bystanding project because it's interesting. Cybersecurity was the same 10 years ago, and no one really took it seriously. And it's the same with automation. Until you take it seriously and do it at scale, you won't really appreciate the benefits. So dabbling around and doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, at an executive level, they'll never buy into the investment needed to really see it transform your business. But by leaning in properly and not suffering from the plague that I think is systemic throughout industry internationally of that wasn't invented here, so we need to prove it for ourselves because we're special and we're individual, we'll only see that slow down. But you don't need a proof to understand why you need to have the most sophisticated cybersecurity to identify threats on your perimeter, or you don't need a proof of concept to understand why you do or do not need a firewall, or you need to undergo penetration testing because the results are there for you to see. RPA is proven technology. It's been around for years and years and years. And if we're using it in the NHS, even more so, industry should be, I would have thought would have been light years ahead of us in using it and exploiting it to its benefit. And the real power comes when you use an automation platform and link it in with existing tools and processes that you already have that have a level of automation. So whether it's onboarding people and using your RPA platform along with your identity checks to validify who somebody is, using an automation platform to write offer letters, whether they're conditional or unconditional. To Roland's point, managing large data sets, using NLP for meta tagging of documents, all those kind of things are all there ready to go. And there's people that know how to do it. It's about leveraging the governance around it, the process, and understanding that automation, like I said at the beginning, is easy to do badly, but hard to do well. Amanda mentioned something called an exception rate earlier. By that, what is meant is how many things are left over that a human needs to deal with. So when Roland said about that huge Excel sheet with 100 or so rows that needs to be evaluated, of the 12 to 16,000 referrals that Amanda's team manage on a monthly basis, less than 1% ends up with a human operator to manage. And that level of exception is so good because we give that much love and attention to the teams that manage it, much like you would to your team that's in charge of your cybersecurity, or if you work in a trading environment, your team that care for your trading floor and your trading panels and stuff. You lose those, you're losing hundreds of thousands a minute. It's the same level of complexity. We want to remove anything falling out from that investment to a human worker, so we're able to capitalize on that ROI.
And Jane, one of the things I took from that, I don't know whether I misinterpreted the way you said it, but the way I would kind of see a lot of that is that, you know, dabbling is important, right? Because obviously you've got to build faith and confidence and stuff, but actually it's almost like there's no such thing as a quick win, right? Because if you because we've all been there, right? You do a quick fix to do something and it then people rely on it, but it's not been built properly. It's not reliable. It's not stable. It won't scale. And I think, you know, there's been a few thoughts around this stuff is you need to allow people to to just see how low code these things are and how easy these things are to build confidence. But actually, it's about really making, I think your point about once you've kind of done that, it is proven. I mean, you know, some of what you've shared today is demonstrating like real value. I mean, some of those numbers are, you know, we'll replay them back, but they're just phenomenal when you think about the rates of success that you're achieving in these processes. So is it really about that, you know, like you know, dabble to understand, but then focus on a team, build on that team, and treat it like you really would any other project? So I think that's often what I see is, and we've got pockets of little things that people have done because it's a bit of fun and it is about driving a bit of awareness and excitement. But the danger is it never goes anywhere beyond that. Is that a fair summary of kind of?
Yeah, point? Of course. I mean, if you imagine that your investment in this technology, let's say, as any other company, you lay down best part of £250,000 on the platform for year one. That's platform licensing plus people to do it. If you really go at it, then you'll return 4 times that in year one, easily.
Yeah.
And by working with, so for other NHS organisations that choose to work with us, when the process is already written and it just needs bespoking to the client environment, that makes that time to success even shorter because it's already done. You're not starting from scratch each time. And I don't understand why we do that, whether we're in the NHS to NHS or just in general industry. There's nothing wrong with learning from somebody else and standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think at times we can let our own hubris get in the way of us, and we don't want to ask other people for help because, again, it wasn't invented here. We want to do it ourselves. But if we exercise a little bit of humility, then we can accelerate our progress. But I think that crosses not just across RPA, to be fair.
No, totally. Tim, we've got a couple of minutes left. Any kind of final thoughts? I mean, James has touched on a lot of areas there around ROI and speed, and you know, and I think you know some huge numbers there actually on return on investment. But any other kind of observations, questions, I guess, to any of the rest of the panel that you want to ask?
The one thing I'm always conscious about is the ability to roll out such great applications, but having those silos outside that don't understand the complete data set within an organization. Because I think having a structured data set that business users can leverage will also benefit in perhaps governing what happens outside of the IT remit. And I think one of the concerns we have is, yes, we can empower users that can pull in APIs from external sources, but they are then having their own oversight and management of certain data sets. But if we can centralize that piece and have one data source, that perhaps would probably benefit the wider business. And I think that's a discussion that we're having internally is the quick wins, and then there's the wider business objective, and it's having your data set in a accessible nature, governed and available, really.
Yeah, that's really important. We see lots, and you know, both internally, we have lots of things that we're trying to processize at the moment. I think a large part of what we see is that, you know, people build something, you know, they go and get some data, scrape it, do some stuff, stick it in a SharePoint list or something like that, and then they do stuff with it. I mean, actually, everyone's doing the same thing. So you're replicating data in many cases in silos sometimes to do the same thing. And I think, you know, that's the point about trying to, you know, how you bring these things together, right? And think about that, you know, what do we try and do with our data? How do we use the single source of data? Because that's the danger, isn't it? All you're doing is replicating data and having different interpretations of what that data does. So I think that's definitely a big maturity aspect for people. Amanda, did you want to comment anything on that? So you have a lot of data, right?
Yeah, we're swimming in the stuff. No, I think sorry, when I lost power, I think James was saying everything I was going to say. But you know, from the term in the sense of approach, having business analysts or people embedded within the team you're trying to, you know, build these processes for is really helpful. We've had a really poor experience historically with another provider of RPA that was absolute crap, and it gave us an 80% exception error rate against it. So absolutely horrendous, because then the staff, one, don't have faith in it, never believe it will work again, and we've kind of duplicated or doubled their work, because they're now having to search for those business exceptions as well as do the bit it was never doing. So it can go terribly wrong when it does, but where it went right was, as James was saying, built by ourselves for ourselves, and guess who knows the processes best, and then you can really max out your opportunities there, I think.
Fantastic. No, thank you. That's really good advice. Any final thoughts, tips for anybody that's kind of going, oh, what's all this about? What would you do differently, right? If you were looking at this again and you'd never done it, is there anything you do differently, or any advice you'd give to anybody?
Yeah, I would look at governance and compliance first. On one side, it's very noble to allow your organization to be more efficient and giving people that empowerment to shorten their workload and so forth. But at the same time, and James alluded to this earlier, it does compound a problem of shadow IT. And once you've let that out and given people that creativity, how much of that are you willing to let go of? And how much of that are you willing to control as well? So once those teams are empowered and they're doing their own thing now, they don't no longer need to come to IT unless there's a problem as such. So having that governance in place first to see how this all looks like, and having those set of practices and policies and how everybody can work together to create something, that's what I would do to start again, if I had to start again.
Fantastic. Roland, have you got any? I know you're very early on your journey, but any kind of insights or advice you'd give to anybody based on what you've learned so far?
I think just get started, play around with it, see what you can do. There is an awful lot you can do, and there is a really good community of people out there that are very happy to share what they've done. There's some really good resources. There's some really good training material you can find, and just get stuck in and get on with it. But I would probably echo Kieran's points around thinking about the security elements and so forth before you start to roll that out to everybody. So saying to some people, and it probably starts with a few people in the IT team, having that kind of mess around, get stuck in, get on with it, learn what you can. So then they can start to develop a few examples and show them to people, and then you start to see the capabilities of it. But they can also help other people when they come up with questions. So you need to find a few people who start to build up their knowledge.
And I would imagine my last question is I would imagine the response is a no-brainer for me, but I'm interested in your view. Do you see this as a really great opportunity for talent retention within organisations and to help people develop beyond what they've always done, or is this is this going to upset people rather than see it as an opportunity?
I certainly see it as that. I mean, I think there's two things. One is it's a new skill set of really interesting stuff for people to learn that they can do a lot with. They can add value to organizations. So for the people that want to do this, they can do that. And the other thing is that I see it as a talent retention tool in terms of getting rid of some of the mundane tasks that other people do that don't make their day job interesting, so they can concentrate on the stuff that is actually intellectually challenging and rewarding and value add. And so people really see what they're doing. So I absolutely see this as core to retention, not just the people using it, but the people affected by it.
And not just getting rid of people, right?
Totally agree with what Roland said there. I think our challenge more comes with retention once the people have these skills, how much demand there is out there in the market for these kind of skills. And when we're paying local government wages, it's difficult to keep hold of people when they can still work from the same office, bedroom, whatever, for anyone these days as well. That's even more of a challenge for us.
Yeah, fantastic. Listen, team, thank you. That's been really, I've certainly learned a lot from that myself. I hope some of you have. I really appreciate all of your time. I know it's precious as ever. Can't quite automate these meetings yet, so really appreciate your attendance and showing your expertise. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And we're taking a break next month for summer holidays and things. And we'll look forward to joining you back in September.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.